Happy Father's Day, everybody, and welcome in to the reveal of the number 25 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the New York Jets. Before we get started, a quick reminder to please do hit that like button down below. It really does help support the channel and the series. Also, if you're new and you enjoy the deep dive, make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss an upload as we count down to number 1 throughout the summer. So the New York Jets, coming in at number 25, are really not unlike the Carolina Panthers, who we just broke down with the 26th ranking in my power rankings, in that they are a really young team, a ton of moving pieces and unknown variables. So when you have all those things, yes, it is going to be difficult for them to rank too high coming into the season. But that said, there is a ton of intrigue and excitement around this Jets team. And in my case, a lot of optimism as well. Many people were asking with the 30th team, the 29th team, the 28th team, where are the New York Jets? And turns out I'm higher on this team than a lot of people out there. And honestly, I hope they shatter this ranking of 25, and I think they have the potential to do it. This is going to be one of those teams that I just can't wait to dial up on Game Pass when I go back through all the games and see how is Robert Saleh using these pieces on defense. How does this offense look with Mike LaFleur, and how does Zach Wilson look? So much excitement around this team, and I think you can make a pretty dang strong case that this team had the single best offseason in the NFL just as far as year A to year B improvement. So let's look at the key departures and additions, and it really starts with the staff improvements. If they did nothing from a player personnel standpoint, you just look at the staff improvements going from Adam Gase to Robert Saleh. If nothing else, you're going from possibly the least motivating head coach in the NFL to the most motivating head coach. All of Robert Saleh's players rave about how good he is in practice, and he kind of is that traditional rah-rah, old-school defensive mind, but he happens to be a really good modern defensive mind as well, and you hope that inspires some change on the defensive side. That really wasn't a bad defense last year by any stretch of the imagination, only getting probably better coaching here, although I'm a bit of a Greg Williams stan on the field. Anyway, love the hire of Robert Saleh, and then you complement it with an amazing just transferring of the San Francisco culture, really, with Mike LaFleur as the offensive coordinator, implementing a proven system that has been replicated all around the league. It feels like every team that goes to the Shanahan offense sees an improvement immediately. Tennessee, Minnesota, Green Bay, expecting the same thing in Atlanta, Cleveland. It's almost a proven commodity at this point. And, I talk all the time about how I always would hire an offensive mind as my head coach, because I do think eventually there's a good chance they lose Mike LaFleur here, because I think that highly of him. But for 2021, I really don't think you could have constructed a better staff here. So that's if Joe Douglas didn't have an amazing offseason improving the roster with the players. You already expect a pretty dramatic improvement just with the coach and culture here. But they also happen to have a kick-ass offseason. Joe Douglas, in my mind, fastly emerging as whatever you want to call it, a premier general manager, a top 10 general manager. I have been so impressed with what he's done since coming over here from Philadelphia. It feels like he just can't miss. Maybe the occasional draft pick I disagree with, but seriously, I keep expecting this team to drop the ball. I thought maybe they're going to end up cutting Jamison Crowder for no good reason. They end up restructuring that contract. Joe Douglas has just been rock solid and has, I think, been a nice foundation for this team to continue to rebuild, but a very busy offseason for Joe Douglas as well. So you look at the key departures, really not that bad. Obviously, Sam Darnold, that whole deal settled. They go with Zach Wilson. You expect to be an upgrade. And then the losses, really no losses on offense. There weren't a lot of great players to lose anyway. And then on defense, they did lose some starters, but it's nothing that either wasn't upgraded or can't be easily replaced. They lose Henry Anderson, with a scheme change here, not the best fit as that 3-4 defensive end of days past. They've got a deep D line. I'm not worried about that. Jordan Jenkins gets upgraded with Carl Lawson, who we're going to talk about. And then Brian Poole, a really good slot corner, but as we'll see when we get to the secondary, there's a few players here that look poised and ready to step into that slot corner position. So the key departures, really not anything of note for me. And then the key addition's huge. Obviously, they draft Zach Wilson, but I got to start with saying the signings of Corey Davis and Carl Lawson, not just two of the best free agents on the market, period, around the league, at premium positions as well, wide receiver and edge rusher, that also happen to be the biggest needs for this Jets team. So you bring in a star receiver in Corey Davis and a star edge rusher in Carl Lawson, both for pretty good contracts as well. I mean, my goodness, you can't ask for a better free agency. And then the draft was really solid as well, kind of not repeating the mistakes they made with Sam Darnold. They go with a new quarterback in Zach Wilson, but they give him a guard and Elijah Moore as well. And Morgan Moses, it seems at this point in time, at this recording, is going to be coming in as well to round out that offensive line. We'll talk about that a little more in depth when we get to the offensive line. That wasn't going to change this team's ranking, but it is something that could change as this video ages. So we'll monitor that. But then on the defensive side of the ball as well, getting better there too. You bring in Sheldon Rankins to add another kind of interior rusher, and CJ Mosley has to be considered in addition here, coming back from the opt-out. Don't forget about CJ Mosley, guys. This guy's a top 10 linebacker in the NFL. Hasn't really played in 2 years because of the injury and then the opt-out. We've kind of forgotten about him, but that is an addition to this defense that I think will make an impact here for Robert Saleh and these guys. So really explosive, exciting offseason for the Jets, and it's got to be, a key feature of why this team comes in higher for me than a lot of people are going to have them out there. But let's go ahead and get into the roster review, breaking down each position group, how they stack up against the rest of the league, starting with the quarterback. So Zach Wilson coming in here. I am a huge believer in Zach Wilson. For those that followed my pre-draft process, I was really there from the get-go there with Zach Wilson. Early January, as soon as I got through all these quarterbacks' games, I came out and said, look, man, this guy's going number 2 overall. Forget about Justin Fields, Trey Lance. It's not going to happen. The gap is just too big. And honestly, I said at the time, the gap between Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence isn't as big as a lot of people realize either. I think Zach Wilson would have been the number 1 pick in a lot of classes, and man, this is where it gets really hard. My eyes and my brain kind of tell me Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 quarterback. Like, go for it, Jags. But my gut and my heart actually tells me Zach Wilson's going to be a better pro. Take that for what it is. It's just one of those things. But yeah, I'm a huge believer in Zach Wilson, man. He has just a good baseline of traits. He's got the accuracy, the arm talent, the mobility, the production in his final year. To me, it's like he is a little bust-proof. It's so difficult to imagine him not being at least a quality starter in the NFL because he's got that baseline of traits. Unless the Jets themselves or the injuries show up for Zach Wilson, which was a legitimate, knock on him, was he's more slender and has been beat up in his college career. It's just difficult to not see Zach Wilson being, a top 16 quarterback, a Ryan Tannehill type of guy that, you put him in a great system, you give him good play calling and good receivers, like he is going to produce. But that's to me, his floor in a lot of ways. Again, the injuries is a different thing, but he showed multiple transcendent traits at the quarterback position that I didn't really see as much from, or as consistently from, the other quarterbacks in this class, and you just don't see him in general for collegiate prospects. So there's 2 traits here I'm talking about. Number 1 is the one that just punches you in the face when you watch Zach Wilson play. It's the play extension, the pocket presence, the ability to navigate pressure while keeping his eyes downfield, and just kind of have that eye in the back of his head and that natural ability to not just, have that pocket presence, but to make those big plays and those wow throws on the run. That's what everyone talks about with Zach Wilson. Lots of, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers stylistic comps for Zach Wilson. And that, of course, is amazing and gets me excited. But one thing that is a little more subtle, and you have to look a little harder with Zach Wilson, that really is what drew that gap for me between Zach Wilson and anybody else, was he has such a detailed understanding of the passing game. Not just a basic processor, the ability to go through his progressions 1, 2, 3, but even a step beyond that. Understanding the positions of safeties and what coverages he's getting. You see Zach Wilson hold safeties with his eyes and understand where the holes in zone coverages are. You'll see him take a little bit off and throw with touch over the second level. You'll see him throw with leverage away from defenders. Very subtle stuff, that more Tom Brady elite trait that you just don't see very often. And if that translates to the NFL, look out, because Zach Wilson is going to understand what NFL open is. This is something that is like really holding, say, Drew Lock back right now. I think it did hold Sam Darnold back here. A lot of young quarterbacks come into the league and they're throwing to these massive windows in college, and they kind of need to see a receiver come open before they throw it. And Zach Wilson's not that case. He threw a ton of tight window throws. He throws with anticipation. That is NFL open. You don't get to the NFL and just have these guys screaming open all the time. And Zach Wilson didn't at BYU, and he showed what an NFL quarterback is supposed to look like in college. So it's just a matter of those things translating to the next level, the Jets putting the right pieces around him and coaching him up. And I think the sky's the limit for Zach Wilson. I do think he can be a top 5 quarterback in the NFL within a couple years. I'm that high on this kid, and it's just him here. There's no one going to take this job. James Morgan, I still can't believe they took him in the 4th round last year. You know, he's got a big arm. Maybe he can make it work in this system. I don't know. That one was really head-scratching to me by Joe Douglas, but it is what it is. Mike White, kind of the same thing, just statuesque, big arm quarterback. No one's taking this job from Zach Wilson. It's his from day one. I think they didn't even mess around, and they were like, yeah, he's the dude. So after all that, the Jets are going to rank 20th at quarterback. He's still a rookie. Every rookie quarterback is going to have learning curves. So you do expect some of that. But to be honest, I think he plays better than that ranking this season, especially by the end of the year as he starts to get comfortable. So 20th at quarterback for Zach Wilson and the New York Jets. Let's move on and talk about the running back position here. Going to be a shorter conversation. This team, not investing too much in this position, which is the right way to do it. So Tevin Coleman comes over from San Francisco. If he can stay healthy, you're very happy with him, especially in this system. He's got that straight line speed you look for in this system, the home run hitting ability, really good at running through arm tackles, a very aggressive running style, and it has led to him kind of getting beat up and dealing with injuries over the last few years. So you don't fully expect him to make it through the year, but in the 10 to 12 games that he's out there, you've got a good starting running back that'll know all of the concepts that you want to run very comfortably. Then Michael Carter, for me, is going to be the number 2 running back, in my opinion. My comp for him was Giovanni Bernard, who is a good running back, but just a smaller dude, doesn't have a ton of power. Carter, probably slightly better vision and contact balance, maybe could exceed the career of Giovanni Bernard, also out of UNC, by the way. But, good mid-round pick here. They spent a 4th-round pick on an impact running back. And what is really nice here is how good he is as a receiver as well, which we will get into. Then they have kind of a competition between LaMichael Pirine, who this team spent a 4th-round pick on last year, and then Ty Johnson, who probably played the best out of the remaining guys here last year. Kind of a speedster, a good scheme fit, and Josh Adams as well, kind of a poor man's Tevin Coleman in a lot of ways. So they do actually have some depth. I think Pirine probably gets the looks there, just based on kind of what they've invested in him. But I do actually think Ty Johnson and Josh Adams are better runners. But ideally, those guys aren't seeing the field a ton, and you're just kind of going Tevin Coleman earlier downs and probably Michael Carter, more of a 3rd down guy. They rank 30th. It's not worth spending a ton of time on. A team that really doesn't invest much in this position, that's kind of what you get. But honestly, that's the way you do it. I'd rather invest in other positions like this team has done, and they're doing things the right way. And I don't think it's going to be a problem as long as the system is in place and the blocking is good, just kind of like in San Francisco. So not a worry for me, but they do rank 30th at running back, which I think is fair. And then the receiving grade, really impressed with what this team did over the offseason, because you look back at what Sam Darnold had to work with last year and the years before that, trying to make the most out of Jamison Crowder as your number 1 receiver, Denzel Mims kind of on and off the field, throwing deep balls to a Vincent Smith, trying to turn Braxton Berrios into a starter. It was just a colossal train wreck, and they have completely overhauled this thing. The addition of Corey Davis is just massive. Not just to get, kind of that prototype number one receiver, started to finally look like that top 10 pick at receiver last year for Tennessee. Just a huge addition. And I think his best football could still be ahead of him. But also a guy that's familiar with this system, coming over from Tennessee. He's going to know all the terminology, and we know he fits the scheme really well. Actually, a fun note here, had a higher PFF grade than Julio Jones last year for receiving grade by, I think he had an 85 point something, and Julio was an 84 point something. Not saying he's better than Julio Jones, but he was great last year for Tennessee. Just the volume, not always there because A.J. Brown was their number one. But huge addition to get Corey Davis in there. Just going to take pressure off the rest of these guys. You're not leaning on Denzel Mims to be your number one target, or Elijah Moore, Jamison Crowder to be players that they aren't. So just massive addition to get that guy in there. And then Denzel Mims now becomes the number two and is in a really good position to develop here. I love how Denzel Mims fits here with Zach Wilson. You watch how Zach Wilson paired with Dax Milne, ironically kind of sounds like Denzel Mims, but they had an amazing chemistry, and they were doing exactly what, to me, Denzel Mims' best traits were at Baylor, and that was really working the sidelines, of course, the ability to release off the line of scrimmage and get vertical deep, but Mims has really great sideline body control. And watching Zach Wilson play with Milne reminded me a ton of Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson. And with Mims' skill set, he can be that number two perimeter player. And if they can establish that chemistry, that's going to be a lethal combination. Now, he grades out as a 73 for now because we just are learning a lot about Mims. Just was beat up with injuries last year, kind of on and off the field, but was good when he was out there. So he is a key variable for how good the receiving core can be in 2021. And then you have Jamison Crowder and Elijah Moore. Going to be interesting to see how these guys get used. Traditionally, the Shanahan offenses do like a little more 12 personnel and not so much like 4 wide receiver sets. So you're probably going to be looking at some bit of a time split there. And Jamison Crowder took a pay cut to stay here and work with Zach Wilson and Mike LaFleur. But Elijah Moore spending that, basically a first-round pick on him with the explosive traits. He could be a little bit more of that Deebo Samuel in this offense, the guy that gets more of those, not going to say manufactured touches, but is really schemed open over the middle of the field really well. But Elijah Moore, not really a Deebo Samuel comp necessarily, because he is really shifty, runs great routes. Definitely a different player, but a great pick nonetheless. And it's going to be fun to see him develop as well. So, man, 1 through 4, this is an explosive, young, versatile group of receivers. Jamison Crowder, by the way, didn't spend much time talking about him because he kind of is what he is, but one of the best slot receivers in the NFL, was actually really good last year. So, man, you kind of have it all with these 4 receivers. And they bring in Keelan Cole. The more the merrier here. To have Keelan Cole as your 5th wide receiver is incredible. I think he could start as a number 2 for some teams in the league. Just kind of a balanced, good guy to have that can step in if any of these guys get hurt. Braxton Berrios did step up in some moments last year. To have him as a 6th is really nice. You got those 2 deep threats in the 2 Smiths there. Lawrence Cager, kind of a big-bodied possession red zone threat. Josh Malone, same thing. Those last 4 names, you could probably take them or leave them. I don't know if they'll keep a 7th receiver or not. But, yeah, you still have a lot to see from these receivers as far as development and all this stuff. But I love the versatility of skill sets and surrounding Zach Wilson with that. The rest of these guys, the tight ends, Chris Herndon, it's put up or shut up time for Chris Herndon. Kind of came on late last season and still has some upside, but got to learn how to block better, especially in this system. But a physical threat, a good guy with the ball in his hands. So big year for him to step up. Just has not shown any consistency, but the potential's there. They bring in Tyler Kroft to kind of increase the floor of that tight end group. He's a good blocker, kind of secure hands type of dude. Just has never emerged as a number 1 tight end, but he's a good number 2, as a good low free agent signing to make sure they have somebody that can play if Herndon doesn't learn how to block. They have Trayvon Wesco, who's kind of the H-back on this team. He's going to be that use check role, the Josiah DeGuara role. Get him on the move, lead block type of stuff. That's really what he's here for. And it's good to see him get a scheme fit like that because that's really his one skill set. And when they drafted him, I was like, he's not going to be a number one tight end. He's kind of like this fullback hybrid. You need a good system to complement that. And now he has it. So he could actually emerge as a really important role player for this offense, but not going to have like a huge receiving season. Ryan Griffin, really good blocker. Interested to see as well Daniel Brown. I've always been impressed when he gets on the field. Really nice athlete, converted college receiver. In a lot of ways reminds me of Robert Tonyan. Just hasn't had Aaron Rodgers and a great scheme to make the most of him. So maybe Mike LaFleur sees that, obviously talking to his brother Matt. And then Kenny Ebo. A lot of people were pissed that I didn't have Ebo in my top 10 tight ends. I didn't see it. He's kind of a raw possession tight end. The athletic traits were fine, but I think he was getting overrated in the draft. So not surprised to see him go undrafted. We'll see if he makes the team. Probably a practice squad piece there. Just has a lot of development to go. And then the running backs, it's solid. Michael Carter, I think, is going to be a day one impact as a receiving threat. I think that Giovanni Bernard really shows up with his route running and ability to flip up field on screens and break tackles in space. That's where he, to me, is going to butter his bread in the NFL, is that third down. I don't want to call him a scat back because he's not a bad running back, but I do think he's really nice as a receiving back. And then Tevin Coleman's fine, just not quite as shifty and as much of a route runner, but he can still, do some things in the receiving game. Ty Johnson as well, a nice receiving back, showed a lot of nice things last year. Lamichael Pirine had a nice skill set at Florida catching the ball, so all these guys are going to be just fine in the receiving game for the running backs. Tons of different pieces. It's a really deep receiving room. They rank 22nd. Again, there's a lot of good receiving cores in the NFL. But they're basically going from bottom 3 last year, if not dead last, to now 22nd. That's a massive improvement in one offseason. And you got guys like Mims and Elijah Moore that can really boost those things up depending how much you see from them in the first year with the youth and the new system here. And then that brings us to the offensive line, which, again, I see significant improvement from the Sam Darnold days. I think Douglas has done a great job to fill out this unit. Let's start with the Morgan Moses piece because that's not official yet. There are tons of reports that the Jets are working on a multi-year contract for Morgan Moses. Would be a slam dunk A+ signing if they can seal the deal on that. Now, it doesn't change their power ranking. They were already 25th before that news came out. But it would change this offensive line grade. I think you bump this down probably to like a 76 or so, and that would probably put them at like 22, 23. I'd have to run the numbers, but just keep that in the back of your mind. I hope they seal the deal on it, and I'm expecting them to, but if Morgan Moses in there, you all of a sudden start to ask some questions about, is Chuma Edoga going to step up, George Fant? I think either of them could, but you'd much rather not lean on that. So Morgan Moses and Mekhi Becton being your two tackles here. If you have Mekhi Becton and Morgan Moses as your tackle duo, that's an outstanding baseline for your offensive line. And then Connor McGovern at center, you could do better, especially from a pass protection standpoint, but he does get off the ball, and I think he's going to be a great scheme fit for these wide zone runs. So I'm perfectly fine with that. And then your guards, you have Elijah Vera Tucker, who, again, maybe could play right tackle as well. If you don't bring Morgan Moses in there, you have good flexibility. So it's not like Morgan Moses signing here would make or break this offensive line. But I think they brought in Elijah Vera Tucker to start at left guard and have, a franchise left side of the line with Becton and Vera Tucker. I wasn't quite as high on Elijah Vera Tucker. It was almost like NFL truth that everyone loved this guy, and he was almost a Quentin Nelson-esque guard prospect and a top 12 pick, and I wasn't there. I think he's a really good guard prospect. He was my number one guard in this class, but stacking him up to other guards in years past, I thought he was comparable. I thought he was a good prospect, a first to a second round type of guy, rock solid pass protector. He's a brick. He's a good athlete. He moves guys in space. Really good prospect. I don't think he's like this transcendent guard prospect like some people thought. I wouldn't have traded probably 2 third-round picks to move up to get him, but it's still a really nice addition here, and he's going to improve this offensive line, and 74 ranking as a rookie could easily exceed that based on his expectations there. And then Greg Van Roten right now is who I'm projecting to start at right guard, but I imagine that's going to be an open competition. Van Roten's been a really solid pass protector, a really consistent guy, really going back to his time in Carolina. But not a great athlete, not a good run blocker, doesn't have great get off, and that's what they look for in this system. So George Fant making a ton of money here. Does he slide into right guard? Alex Lewis, more of a run block first type of guard. Even Shuma Adoga, who's 6'3", could compete at right guard. I feel really good about that right guard position. One of these guys, you got 4 guys that I think could realistically start and do a good job at right guard, which is more than pretty much anybody can say in the league. You got a bunch of other guys. Cam Clark was a 4th round pick several years ago. Some physical upside there as well. Also, keep an eye on my dude, Teton Saltez. Really good to see him end up in a perfect scheme fit. I mean, this guy was an uber athlete coming out of New Mexico, and he plays offensive line the way you want to see guys play offensive line. He plays like he wants to beat you into the dirt every snap, and he's got the athleticism to do it. Completely unrefined as a pass protector, and maybe another guy you keep an eye on as a guard because he's a little bit lighter and smaller, but just a really fun prospect. Cool to see him end up here. Good scouting by Joe Douglas, in my opinion. And then, no one else, we just ran about 5 deep with the depth. You can only keep so many guys here. They did bring in Dan Feeney, was chugging beer at a hockey game, good for him, but was miserable for the Chargers for a long time. Maybe the backup center here. But you got a ton of depth. Feel really good about this offensive line. So 18th for the offensive line. Really good job beefing these guys up and focusing on this group by Joe Douglas. So the offense as a whole for me is going to rank 20th. Same thing for the offensive coaching. Still a lot to learn about Mike LaFleur, but I just have so much confidence in this system and Mike LaFleur himself. His brother, very successful immediately for the Packers. This system, everywhere it goes, seems to work, and I just have a lot of confidence that that was the right hire here. And I like the scheme fits for a lot of these guys as well. So feel very good about the offensive coaching, hitting the ground running. They're going to run that Shanahan offense that's going to be a ton of stretch runs, hopefully a good mix of counters as well. You're going to get a lot of play action boots that look like those outside runs. That is the core of the Shanahan offense is, beat you up with outside zone and good run blocking, and then have the quarterback that can stem off a play-action boot because the entire defensive line thinks it's an outside run, and then all of a sudden the quarterback's, wide open in space, can either run it himself or flip it to a tight end or a receiver coming back the other way. That is the core of the Shanahan offense, though it's a lot more complex than that. Expecting that to all come together here for the Jets and be a good offense, ranking 20th here in year one. And that's going to bring us to the defensive side of the ball, where we are going to start with the run defense here. And I have a feeling that the majority of NFL fans did not know that in a year where they were basically projected the number 1 pick all season, in a year where they had a lame duck head coach that everyone wanted fired in Adam Gase, and in a year where they traded away one of their top nose tackles and top run defending middle linebackers and had their best run defending middle linebacker opt out, they still ranked 4th in the NFL for run defense per BFF last year. And that's why they're going to rank 1st in the NFL this year. You upgrade with Robert Saleh, who's going to get these guys to fly around the ball. You get CJ Mosley back. I have heavy expectations for this run defense next year, and I think that's going to be the key identity of this defense. Is they're going to say, you are going to have to pass against us. Now, we'll talk about that secondary and if that's a strategy that's going to work for this defense all the time, but this team is going to dunk on your running game. It starts up front here. Quinnen Williams, Lorenzo Fatukasi, outstanding, possibly the best run defending interior duo in the league. Fatukasi, so underrated. I bring him up all the time. For those that have been around here, it's like every kind of mid-round, potentially dominant defensive tackle. That's just not much of a pass rusher. So much play strength with this dude. Plays with the discipline. He enjoys stunting the run. True two-gapping type of interior defensive lineman. I can't speak highly enough about Lorenzo Fatukasi. But then you put Quinnen Williams, the number 2 overall pick right next to him. The number 3, I think it was number 2, right? But yeah, excellent run defender. Super quick and a great complement to Fatukasi. Also very strong, but does offer a little bit more movement on the inside. So a great duo there. The interior depth is fine. They're going to move a lot of these guys around. So Sheldon Rankins comes in. He's a decent run defender, probably a better pass rusher, a little bit on the lighter side. You got Nathan Shepard, who, had a rough year last year, probably was the one guy that didn't really show that development, but you go back to his college career and the first years of his NFL career, you expect some regression back to the mean with his ability to hold his own in the run game. So that's fine. And then, Marshall, Smart, whatever. You go 4 deep with some good interior pieces there. And then on the edge, so we're going to list Carl Lawson as the starter, though I don't think we see a ton of him on first downs because you have Kyle Phillips, who is an excellent, bigger-bodied run defender. I look at Kyle Phillips as kind of the Eric Armstead coming over for Robert Saleh. He really values that big-bodied, wide 9 defensive end. So Kyle Phillips is definitely going to get a lot of early down work here. But they also brought in Ronald Blair, who is 6'4", 270 pounds, and a great run defender. So I think, Carl Lawson getting listed as a starter here, but I really don't think he plays much on first down at all. He's fine as a run defender, but he's a guy that's been injured throughout his career, and you just want him fresh for pass rush downs. So, maybe plug in Ronald Blair there for early downs when teams are really trying to run the ball. And that's just straight up like dominant defensive line. You got John Franklin Myers, who's been a 3-4 defensive end and kind of a pass rushing specialist for this team. Never really played with the play strength and discipline as an interior defensive lineman in that Greg Williams system. But that said, he really does fit the athletic profile of a Michael Bennett, of a Eric Armstead, and could see a significant increase in his run defending ability more as a guy that plays the edge, that sees tight ends on the backside of inside zone and gets tackles instead of potential double teams on the inside. So do keep an eye on that. He has not graded out well as a run defender in his career, but I do think he fits the system well and could see some early down work. You've even got Vinny Curry, who is like an older version of John Franklin Myers. You got Bryce Huff, undrafted stud from last year, more of a pass rusher, kind of an undersized guy. Jabari Zuniga, who's just another Joe Douglas pick that I was like, really? Why? I like pretty much everything he does, but that pick and the quarterback pick last year, I was really scratching my head. And then Hamilcar Rashed gets picked up as an undrafted free agent this year. It's like Bryce Huff all over again. Dude that just flies off the ball, that can play with power. I think he's a much better football player than Jabari Zuniga, so we'll see how that plays out, both run defense and pass rush, honestly. But yeah, you got a deep edge group. And then the linebackers, you really are leaning at this point in time on CJ Mosley staying healthy. You go back to his prime in Baltimore, which is like 3 years ago, a premier run defending 250-pound middle linebacker. And based on their moves, I think they're counting on him to be there. They don't trade him away, and they really don't address this room much at all other than signing Jarrad Davis here for a cheap one-year deal. Do keep an eye on Blake Cashman, though. This was one of my dudes in the 2019 NFL draft. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware of his injury concerns that have surfaced in the NFL, but my God, I thought that his tape was about as good as Devin Bush's. Man, I really think he can play football at a really high level. Great athlete, incredible instincts, and a good cover player. Just hasn't been able to stay healthy, which really explains why he fell in the draft, in my opinion. So you're hoping he stays healthy. You hope you get CJ Mosley. Definitely question marks there. But Jarrad Davis, I would think with Robert Saleh, he can coach him up and get a little more out of Jarrad Davis, who's just been really inconsistent for Detroit, but a former first-round pick with size and speed. Could play a little more of a simplified role and maybe a little bit of that Bruce Irvin sort of hybrid blitzing linebacker role with these Seattle ties with this defense going way back. But Jarrad Davis, a really good blitzing linebacker, maybe some plans there. But the linebacker depth is really concerning, which is fine. Those are the positions that you want to be weak and not invest in. You want to go pretty much anywhere else based on the modern game. But they do draft a couple of safety conversion projects here, Sherwood and Nasiriel Dean. I picture them as a weak side linebacker type of, dime linebacker impact here. Sherwood, an interesting prospect. I thought he was just a special teamer because he had one of the highest tackle grades in college football last year, just did not miss a tackle. But a 6'2", 215-pound safety in college who runs a 4.76 40 time. Just a weird blend of skills there. But with the tackling ability and the kind of tenacity that he plays with, there could be something more in him as a true linebacker in the NFL. 4.7, 6 speed. Maybe it was a bad day. You bump it up to like 4.7 speed. That can play at linebacker in the NFL, but he is also undersized. He's not like he's 235 pounds. So we'll see what he turns into. They did spend a 5th-round pick on him. And Hamza Nasir-Eldin, I see him as even more of a safety type of weak side linebacker than Sherwood. He can man up some tight ends, be a mismatch type of defender, kind of that modern safety linebacker hybrid, but not a run defender here. And then no one else really worth talking about, honestly, with the linebackers. It's a thin group. But that said, this team defends the run at a very high level. It is because of that defensive line, and getting CJ Mosley back is only going to help things. And yeah, good luck running on this Jets front. I really can't speak highly enough of it. I literally can't. They rank first in the league. So then the pass rush, also a really good group. I just don't think people realize how good this Jets defensive line is, where they're going to rank 12th for the pass rush, so it's more of a run defending group than a pass rushing group, but you do see the talent there show up as well. So Carl Lawson, you're going to see that big jump going from a 70 run defender to an 84 pass rusher. If he could just be guaranteed health for a full season, in my mind, is a low-end, true number 1 pass rusher. He has speed, power, tons of different ways he can beat you, whether it's bend or different counter moves. He can beat you with power. Such a fun watch. Like, if you wanted to build a clinic for how to be an explosive, well-rounded pass rusher for a young, 4-star, 5-star athlete, Carl Lawson's tape is right up there with the best of them. And that addition was so big because they didn't have that edge presence. They have interior presence. You got Quinnen Williams, you got Sheldon Rankins, and John Franklin Myers was incredible as an interior rusher last year. So how did these guys all get used? Quinnen Williams is a big variable for this team this year. He really came on late last year and looked like a guy that's going to emerge as a Fletcher Cox-esque presence on the interior, a Chris Jones-esque presence, a Kenny Clark-esque presence, that guy that you kind of have to double, that elite alpha interior rusher. There was some big moments down the stretch last year, and if you can get that consistently out of him, which you are obviously hoping you can based on how highly you drafted him, that's going to change the entire scope of this defense. So you're really looking at Quinnen Williams. Can he elevate from, I would say he is at a star level based on what we saw last year, but can he elevate to that superstar level, that transcendent type of defensive player that you have to circle and say, what are we doing every play to neutralize this guy? Otherwise, he's just going to blow it up. But then you have Sheldon Rankins now next to him. Probably going to see a little bit of a rotation here with these different pieces. You have Fadakasi, who they just love so much as a run defender that he's naturally going to be out there for a decent amount of pass rush snaps. So he's going to be in the mix there. And then you have Rankins, who you bring in, who is that 3 technique, kind of undersized, good pass rusher, nice addition, just to have that depth and rotation. And then John Franklin Myers, I think we see him play a little bit all over the place. A little bit of 7 technique, 5 technique, 4-eye, 3, a little bit of everything, and just kind of move him around as that chess piece for Robert Saleh. He has get off, length, and power. That is how he wins at his best. You hope to continue to see development with the, kind of the finesse aspect of it, but underrated piece there. John Franklin Myers. Had to kind of pump him up here just to highlight how good he was as a pass rusher last year. Had over 50 pressures as that rotational defensive interior piece. But a new scheme fit, so it's hard to project exactly how he's going to fit in. And then let's see, anyone else really worth talking about? Phillips is lengthy and powerful. He can do some things from the edge. Blair as well, decent pass rusher. I like Bryce Huff still, but it's going to be harder for him to see the field this year. And then Vinny Curry is also here, a veteran pass rusher. I don't know if he's going to make the team based on how many pieces they have in here, because he is a little bit redundant with like Kyle Phillips and Blair and John Franklin Myers as kind of that bigger body defensive end type. But that said, is still a productive veteran and could be someone that they want to have for this rotation. So you're very happy with the depth and movable parts that they have, and you have a good coach to deploy those things. And then keep an eye on Hamilcar Rashed. As I mentioned, I think he's just straight up a better player than Jabari Zuniga. That he was like an early day 3 type of prospect with length and explosiveness off the ball and can play with power. So just a guy that needs to be refined, but with a coach here in Robert Saleh, you got to keep that guy around. I don't even care if you have to cut Jabari to do it. I just think Rashid's upside is so much higher, and you got to coach either guy up, so why not keep the guy with the freaky athletic traits, which Jabari Zuniga just doesn't have. The interior defensive line depth from a pass rushing perspective, really the only other guy worth talking about is going to be Jonathan Marshall. Was a 6th round pick out of Arkansas, is kind of that one gap bazooka type of a defensive tackle where the right defense coordinator kind of puts him in the right spot for a scheme or a blitz stunt and just says, you shoot this gap, you use your get off and power, and you split it, and you force offensive line to make a choice. And that's Jonathan Marshall. Really not much of like a run defending discipline skill set at all, but he was one of my favorite kind of sleeper interior defensive linemen in a pretty poor class. So another guy with like Hamilcar Rashed, pair him with a good coaching staff and a system that can use these guys right. For a 6th round pick for Marshall and an undrafted pickup for Rashed, I'm not going to be surprised if those guys turn into like role players, like key role players for this defense someday. So again, 12th for the pass rush. It's just a really good defensive line. It's this true strength and identity of this team. I think Robert Saleh is really going to buy into the versatility and talent of this group, and it's going to help this defense surprise a lot of people, even if the secondary isn't really what you hope for. And we'll get to that in just a second, but we're going to do the linebacking grade first, where they're going to be 17th with the linebackers. Really not much left to add here, just kind of showing that grade. CJ Mosley is, a decent cover player for his size, but, he's stiff. He's not a guy you want in man coverage a ton. That's why you have a Cyril Dean or a Blake Cashman, who are much more fluid athletes who you hope can be better cover third down linebackers, which is going to be the knock here, because with CJ Mosley out there, that is kind of your true Mike run defending type, and as a second cover guy, you're totally fine with CJ Mosley. And then Jarrad Davis again, I just see him as a role player in a specific kind of weak side, strong side role where he can blitz and not be asked to do as much as he was in Detroit. And, we could see a better version of Jarrad Davis. The tools are all there. It's just a matter of deploying them correctly. And 17th for the linebackers. And then the secondary. We've hinted at this, but it's not a good secondary. It's quite possibly the worst group of cornerbacks in the NFL, but it's helped by a nice group of safeties. So let's do the corners first. Bryce Hall and Bleswan Austin are just young, high upside pieces that are just unproven. Bryce Hall was probably, a true second round talent, but fell in the 2020 draft because of injury concerns into the 5th round. And once he got on the field for the Jets, he looked like a potential future starter. And I think he might be even a little underrated. People were screaming that the Jets have no corners. Bryce Hall, he needs to prove more, but I actually feel, especially in this system where they're going to run a ton of cover 3 and cover 4, which is what he can do, I actually feel pretty good about Bryce Hall becoming a quality starter. Is he going to be a number 1? Probably not, but I still feel half decent about him developing and not being a weak spot for this defense. Bleswan Austin is a little more polarizing, really good as a rookie, and then really struggled last year, so he's much more of a wild card here. I could see him taking off because he was one of my sleepers in that 2019 class and has a ton of athletic upside and has shown flashes, but again, really got beat up last year on the field. So that's the one spot you look at. Now, one thing I need to mention here is Richard Sherman's going to play for the Jets, right? Is that not does that not just make too much sense? He loves Robert Saleh, big market, glaring need here. I'm pretty sure that they have the cap space. All of a sudden, if you have Richard Sherman as a mentor to Bryce Hall and Bleswan Austin, that's a massive boost. This at least becomes a top 20 secondary. So I can't put it in there right now, but my God, Richard Sherman is going to be a New York Jet next year. I would bet my money on it. We just can't put it in here right now. And that maybe would boost them up in the power rankings. So we'll see. Javelin Guidry in the slot, he's one of my dudes too. Like, God, Joe Douglas has been an undrafted, like, he is finding diamonds, man. Bryce Huff, Javelin Guidry, two of my dudes last year that I thought they were insane, and they both made impacts as rookies. Javelin Guidry, I'm speechless that he was undrafted. The dude is 4.3 speed, played in a cover 3 system just like this at Utah, by the way, and played at a very high level, showed zone instincts. He's got the speed to man guys up. He tackles well. He's an elite special teams guy. How? Like, everyone was all about Elijah Molden as a second-round pick this year. Why didn't Javelin Guidry get that high? The difference between Elijah Molden and Javelin Guidry as college prospects, itty-bitty. I think I had 3rd or 4th round grade on both of those guys. So I don't mind losing Brian Poole. I thought Javelin Guidry looked outstanding when he was on the field. I think they feel pretty good about him. Now, he is an undrafted second-year player. You have some insurance there. They bring in Michael Carter in the 5th round here to kind of push him a little bit. LaMarcus Joyner could, in an emergency, go play slot corner. He's got tons of experience doing that. So, we'll see if he reaches these expectations that I'm setting, but feel very good about Guidry as your slot. Depth here is really hard to look at. Lamar Jackson at cornerback 4 at this point in time, you really don't want him on the field. He's just slow, and it's not like he's got these amazing zone instincts. He's just a big, physical kind of press corner. Whatever. We've seen these guys come and go. I think it's going to be the same with Lamar Jackson. The cornerback, don't soundbite that and make it be the quarterback. But yeah, they take Michael Carter in the 5th round out of Duke. I love having Michael Carter as a slot corner out of Duke, and then Michael Carter, the running back, out of UNC. Can't think of a better inter-team rivalry than that. But anyway, I think he's good slot depth. I don't think he's better than Javelin Guidry, but I think he could be a starting slot someday, so that was a decent pick. Jason Pinnock was another good pick. This dude just needs to be coached up, but he has elite tools at the cornerback position. He's like 6'2", 200 pounds. If he ends up beating out Bless One Austin at some point, really not going to be surprised there. I did have him on my guys list. I do like Jason Pinnock for where they got him, as well as Brandon Echols. He was a top 20 corner in this class for me. Totally needs to be coached up. They really went with the speed profile for these corners. He has legit 4.3 speed, Brandon Echols. And, at day one, I think he contributes on special teams. And then if Saylor can get him in the right position, maybe we see something from him. But not a guy that can change gears very well. So the short area stuff is a major question for him. But in a cover 3, cover 4 system, there could be something there in Brandon Echols if you can get the mental side of the game up to speed. And then we're getting a little long here, so I'm not going to talk about these kind of veterans, Ballantyne, Hardy, Jackson. Do keep an eye on Isaiah Dunn, maybe a little bit more of a heady player than Echols and Pinnock, coming out of a cover 4 kind of off-zone coverage system out of Oregon State. I also had a draftable grade on him, I believe, so a decent pickup there as an undrafted pickup. Overall, some interesting names, guys with upside, but just completely unproven in the cornerbacks. But then you throw Marcus May up there at top at safety. To me, borderline top 10 safety in the league, was outstanding last year. Playing on the franchise tag. Let's get this guy a contract extension, Jets. You already let Jamal Adams go. I think Marcus May is one of the guys that you want to keep and be a cornerstone for your defense. Super versatile dude. This guy can run any sort of coverage, but I especially love how he fits in this system. He's a rangy free safety for cover 3 because this team's going to run mostly cover 3, cover 4, and cover 6 were the splits for the Niners last year. So no questions about him as a single high cover 3 safety, but he has good agility and ability to run cover 4, come up a little bit more towards the box, and flip that into man coverage, being more of that modern hybrid safety. So absolutely love the scheme fit there. Could be even better this year, Marcus May. Get this man a contract extension or he's only going to get more expensive for you, New York. You got Ashton Davis, who I do think plays as the number 2 safety here because they want to see that development there, whereas you kind of know what you have in LaMarcus Joyner. Davis, very similar skill set wise to Marcus May. You can line him up as a single high free safety. If you want to rotate Marcus May down, Davis has great hips. He can man dudes up, great ball skills, amazing tackler. Struggled a little bit in his rookie year. It's fine. It was a tough year for rookie defensive backs. We just need to see more from Ashton Davis, but I like the potential in that safety duo. And then you have some insurance. And LaMarcus Joyner, he just buys you room margin for error with both safety and slot corner. I will also say that, LaMarcus Joyner, Jimmy Ward, very similar. Like as slot corners, both those guys have had their struggles. But Jimmy Ward moved up back to free safety, just like LaMarcus Joyner did for the Rams when he was considered a top 10 safety. And Jimmy Ward, as that kind of 5'10", 5'9" hybrid defensive back in Robert Saleh's defense, went right back to being a high-end free safety, and their Super Bowl season was one of the best in the league. So LaMarcus Joyner gives you positional flexibility, he gives you experience and a high floor at safety. I think we do see all three of these safeties on the field throughout the season, and I think we're going to look back and laugh at the Raiders for not playing LaMarcus Joyner at safety, because that's where he's best. That's where he was kick-ass for the Rams. So I love that signing. Super cheap. Like, why not? And then you got Sherrod Niesman, who did some nice things for the Falcons last year. Campbell, who's a special teamer. And yeah, there's your secondary. They ranked 27th because of all of the unknowns, and I don't see them shattering that ranking, barring a Richard Sherman signing. You look at really Bryce Hall, Austin, Guidry, and Davis. Leaning on all four of those guys, you need 5 good pieces in the secondary to have a good secondary, and to expect even 2 out of those 4 to be good quality starters is difficult to do. So just being realistic there for the secondary. I see a lot of upside here, but it's going to take some time, I think. It's not going to be a 1-year revamped secondary here, most likely, though I do like some of these pieces. So the defense as a whole ranks 15th. You pair great defensive coaching that ranks 11th for me for Robert Saleh. I don't think you'll get a ton of argument there. He's one of the top defensive minds in the league. Just needs to prove that he can repeat that as a head coach with a different staff without Nick Bosa and those boys. But the overall defense, again, 15th with that defensive line, great coaching, decent linebacking core, and a secondary that has room to grow but should also be helped by this scheme as well. The home field for the Jets, they're going to have to get it back. It's also an outdoor cold weather stadium, which doesn't always get as loud as, say, an indoor stadium. So that explains maybe a little bit of the lower ranking there. And the scheme, we've kind of hinted at it quite a bit, but it's going to be a 4-3 defense with those Seattle ties, but it's not a strictly cover 3 defense. Even when they go cover 3, they don't press as much, or at least they didn't in San Francisco. But they also ran a lot more cover 4 than the Seattle Seahawks have as of late. So a very zone multiple 4-3 defense. They'll mix in some man coverage, but it's not a lot. It's like probably about 15-20% here, which is towards the bottom 10 in the league as far as man coverage percentage. But yeah, expect a lot of cover 3, especially with those kind of lengthy press corners here, and a lot of off-man cover 4 as well, really taking advantage of the versatility of those safeties. And then a recap of the team overall: 20th for offense, 15th for defense. So how do you get 25th? It's the culture and the special teams. Special teams was abysmal last year. Sam Ficken is their kicker, quite possibly the worst kicker in the NFL right now. Just not a lot of range there. So that's going to be a question mark, is can Robert Saleh get, not just the kicking game to be better, but the return game. Who's going to be the returner here? It's pretty unclear. Maybe Elijah Moore can be that dude, or maybe they want to save him for offense. We'll find out. But also the kick coverage as well. That I do think will be improved. But they were a poor special teams last year. They have a lot of work to do there. And then the culture, ranking 29th here. People were asking for this team to be ranked 30th, 29th, 28th. That culture would be the reason why. Like, this Jets team hasn't given us a lot of benefit of the doubt. This looks all great on paper, but they have to repair this thing really from the bottom and overhaul this thing. Find out, who are you going to be your leaders in the locker room? What types of practices work for you? How do you communicate with your players? There's just a lot to learn and rebuild here. It usually just doesn't happen overnight. So 29th for the culture, though. I firmly believe Robert Saleh is going to repair that thing probably quicker than a lot of coaches, because he's that kind of coach. And then a recap of the strengths and weaknesses for this team. So the strengths for me: promise at quarterback, similar to what we talked about with the Jaguars. When you have a quarterback in the building throwing missiles and making plays and looks like a guy that you can win a Super Bowl with, it gives you that extra motivation in the weight room and on the practice field to, develop as a team together. I think it's big. And then offensive scheme, I'm very high in the Shanahan offense and how LaFleur is going to implement this thing here, paired with really nice skill player versatility and speed and athleticism at that position. A ton of upside with this receiving core. Offensive line, to me, at least the depth and just future outlook for this offensive line, I think, is very promising, something that they have not had for a long time. And they're going to be pretty injury-proof as well because they do run about 7 or 8 deep of guys that I think can play. The defensive line is the defining strength of this team. It's a premier strength and identity for this team. They're going to force you to, avoid their D-line, pass against them, and double team and all that stuff. And the defensive coaching is going to be a massive strength, in my opinion, as well. Robert Saleh, I really like how he has not been so stubborn with the Seattle 3, something that guys like Gus Bradley and Dan Quinn in that Pete Carroll tree kind of have been a little more stubborn to the way Pete Carroll plays, even Pete Carroll himself. They've been very strict to the old Legion of Boom style. Robert Saleh has adapted his defense. He's run a lot more cover 4, off-man cover 3. He has evolved the cover 3 and modernized it. And I respect that a ton. I think he's only going to continue to grow as a defensive mind. And then the weaknesses for this team, just youth on offense. There's so many moving pieces. You have a rookie quarterback, a first-time play caller in LaFleur. They are going to have some learning curves. I don't know if it's going to necessarily be struggles, so to speak, but you can expect it and not be overly critical of them if they experience some bumps in the roads. Cornerback, we just detailed it. Massive glaring weaknesses. The best receiving cores, the best quarterbacks are going to annihilate and abuse these corners if they don't develop quickly. And then, like we said, it's a culture in repair. This is not a winning organization. They have a winning formula, a winning game plan here, but the execution, the culture needs to be rebuilt really from the bottom up. And again, you can expect some learning curves there with that. So where does that bring us with the schedule? Kind of an optimistic outlook, honestly. They start with a decent stretch. Like at Carolina, I have them losing, but it's a winnable game. That's probably going to be about a pick'em game. New England, I think they match up really well because they're so good with the run defense. I think it's still Cam Newton at that point in time, which they're going to be very run heavy. So I think they actually match up really well with the New England Patriots. At Denver, I do have as a loss, but again, a very winnable game. And then Tennessee, again, with that run defense, I'm going to go on a limb and actually say that they beat the Tennessee Titans and shut down Derrick Henry. We've seen that offense get to be a little one-dimensional when you can stop the run. Then they have to go to UK before the bye. I've got a loss, not sweeping New England, and then beating Cincinnati because of the line play advantage that I think they'll have. Carl Lawson, revenge game. At Indianapolis, Buffalo, not a great stretch there, got them losing. But then a nice stretch here. Miami, I think the line play, forcing Tua to pass to beat them. I think they can split against Miami. And then at Houston, Philadelphia, actually got them ripping off 3 wins in a row there. New Orleans, at Miami, a couple losses there. And then finishing off with a win against Jacksonville, a loss against Tampa Bay, and a loss at Buffalo. I have them going 7-10, which actually exceeds their Vegas over-under of 6 wins, which is my first over prediction on the season. We mentioned the optimism. It's a big part of it. Now, some of those learning curves, I think, do show up, and it's probably going to be a situation where they're just short of the playoffs. Not quite going to say they have the playoff ceiling. You'd really need Zach Wilson to be like a solid top 10 quarterback by the end of the season, or really by midseason for that to happen, and that's just unlikely. But I have them as a floor of 5 wins and a ceiling of 9 wins. Overall, an optimistic outlook for the New York Jets. One of these teams that I cannot wait to watch. I think there's so many fun pieces here, schematically and just the player talent and everything. I'm excited for this Jets team, man. And that is going to do it for this deep dive. Let me know in the comments down below. Is this ranking still too high? Did I convince you otherwise? Jets fans, is this not high enough? Let me know all in the comments down below. I try to read every comment. Also, make sure you hit that like button, please, to support the series, and subscribe so you don't miss any uploads as we go through the series. I should be posting another one of these within the next 3 days. Look out for that on Wednesday. And then also, make sure you check out the Fully Inflated Football podcast on your podcasting services. I will be posting an audio version of the podcast within the next 30 hours or so, doing the mailbag from all of those great questions we've got there. So check that out. But Until next time, cheers. We'll see you later.